Distinguished President of the Senate, the Honorable Speaker, the National Chairman of All Progressive Congress, the Principal Officers of the National Assembly, Excellencies, the State Governors present here, distinguished members of the National Assembly, Secretary to the Government of the Federation, honorable members of the Federal Executive Council. I will start by asking you to pardon my voice. As you can hear, I have a cold as a result of working hard to meet your deadline. I am delighted to present the 2020 federal budget proposals to this joint session of the National Assembly, being my first budget presentation to this 9th National Assembly. Before presenting the budget, let me thank all of you, distinguished and honorable members of the National Assembly, for your avowed commitment to cooperate with the executive to accelerate the pace of our socio-economic development and enhance the welfare of our people. I will also once again thank all Nigerians who have demonstrated confidence in our ability to deliver on our socio-economic development agenda by re-electing this administration with a mandate to continue the change. We remain resolutely committed to the actualization of our vision of a bright and prosperous future for all Nigerians. During this address, I will present highlights of our budget proposals for the next fiscal year. The Honorable Minister of Finance, Budget and National Planning will provide full details of these proposals subsequently. The economic environment remains very challenging globally. The International Monetary Fund expects global economic recovery to slow down from 3.6% in 2018 to 3.5% in 2020. This reflects uncertainties arising from security and other tensions with attendant implications on commodity price volatility. Nearer to home, however, sub-Saharan Africa is projected to continue to grow from 3.1% in 2018 to 3.6% in 2020. This is driven by investor confidence, oil production recovery in key exporting countries, sustained strong agricultural production, as well as public investment in non-dependent economies. Mr. Senate President, Right Honorable Speaker, I am pleased to report that the Nigerian economy thus far has recorded 9 consecutive quarters of GDP growth. Annual growth increased from 0.82% in 2017 to 1.93% in 2018 and 2.02% in the first half of 2019. The continuous recovery reflects our economy's resilience and gives credence to the effectiveness of our economic policies thus far. We also succeeded in significantly reducing inflation from a peak of 18.72% in January 2017 to 11.02% by August 2019. This was achieved through effective fiscal and monetary policy coordination, exchange rate stability, and sensible management of our foreign exchange. We have sustained acceleration to our external reserves, which have risen from 23 billion United States dollars in October 2016 to about 42.5 billion United States dollars by August 2019. The increase is largely due to favorable prices of crude oil in the international market, minimal disruption of crude oil production given the stable security situation in the Niger Delta region, and our import substitution drive, especially in key commodities. The foreign exchange market has also remained stable due to the effective implementation of the central bank's intervention to restore liquidity, improve access, and discourage currency speculation. Sufficient windows were created that enabled small businesses, investors, and importers in priority economic sectors to have timely access to foreign exchange. Furthermore, as a sign of increased investor confidence in our economy, there were remarkable inflows of foreign capital in the second quarter of 2019. The total value of capital imported into Nigeria increased from 12 billion United States dollars in the first half of 2018 to 14 billion United States dollars for the same period, 2019. Distinguished honorable members of the National Assembly, you will recall that 2019 budget of continuity was based on a benchmark oil price of United dollars 60 per barrel, oil production of 2.3 million barrels per day, and an exchange rate of 305 naira to the United States dollar. Based on these parameters, we projected a deficit of 1.918 trillion naira, or 1.37% of gross domestic product. As at June 2019, federal government's actual aggregate revenue, excluding government-owned enterprises, was 2.04 trillion naira. This revenue performance is only 58% of the 2019 budget target due to the underperformance of both oil and non-oil revenue sources. Specifically, oil revenues were below target by 49% as at June 2019. This reflects the lower than projected oil production for cost under recovery on supply of premium motor spirit, PMS, as well as higher expenditures on pipeline security maintenance and frontier exploration. Daily oil production averaged 1.86 million barrels a day as at June 2019, as against the estimated 2.3 million barrels a day that was assumed. This shortfall was partly offset as the market price of Bonny Light crude oil averaged 67.2 United States dollars per barrel, which was higher than the benchmark price of United States dollars 60 per barrel. Additionally, revenue projections from restructuring of joint venture oil and gas assets and enactment of new fiscal terms for production sharing contract do not materialize, as the enabling legislation for these reforms is yet to be passed into law. The performance of non-oil taxes and independent revenues, such as internally generated revenues, were 614.57 billion naira and 217.84 billion naira, respectively. The receipts from value-added tax were below expectation due to lower levels of activities in certain economic sectors in the aftermath of national elections. Corporate taxes were affected by the reasonability of collections, which tend to peak in the second half of calendar year. On the expenditure side, 2019 budget implementation was also hindered by the combination of delay in its approval and underperformance of revenue collections. As such, only recurrent expenditure items have been implemented substantially. Of the prorated expenditure of 4.46 trillion naira budgeted, 3.39 trillion naira had been spent by June 30th, 2019. In compliance with the provisions of the 2018 Appropriation Act, we implemented the 2018 capital budget till June 2019. Capital releases under 2019 budget commenced in the third quarter. As at 30th September 2019, a total of about 294.63 billion naira had been released for capital projects. I have directed the Ministry of Finance, Budget and National Plan to release an additional 600 billion naira of the 2019 capital budget by the end of the year. Despite the delay in capital releases, a deficit of 1.35 trillion naira was recorded at the end of June 2019. This represents 70% of the budgeted deficit for the full year. Despite these anomalies, I am happy to report that we met our debt service obligations. We are current on staff salaries, and overhead costs have also been largely covered. Distinguished senators, honorable members, let me now turn to the 2020 appropriation, which is designed to be a budget of A, fiscal consolidation to strengthen our macroeconomic environment, B, investing in critical infrastructure, human capital development, and enabling institutions, especially in key job-creating sectors. Incentivizing private sector investment essential to complement the government's development plans, policies, and programs, and D, enhancing our social investment programs to further deepen their impact on those marginalized and most vulnerable Nigerians. Distinguished and honorable members of the National Assembly, the 2022 Medium-Term Expenditure Framework and Fiscal Strategy paper set out the parameters for the 2020 budget. We have adopted a conservative oil price benchmark of 57 United States dollars per barrel, daily oil production of 2.18 million barrels per day, and an exchange rate of 305 naira for American dollar in 2020. Accompanying the 2020 budget proposal is a finance bill for your kind consideration and passage into law. This finance bill has 5 strategic objectives in terms of achieving incremental but necessary changes to our fiscal laws. These objectives are A, promoting fiscal equity by mitigating instances of regressive taxation. B, reforming domestic tax laws to align with global best practices. C, introducing tax incentives for investments in infrastructure and capital markets. D, supporting micro, small, and medium-sized businesses in line with our ease of doing business reforms, and raising revenues for government. The draft finance bill proposes an increase of the VAT rate from 5 to 7.5%. As such, the 2020 appropriation bill is based on this new VAT rate. The additional revenues will be used to fund health, education, and infrastructure programs. As the states and local governments are allocated 85% of all VAT revenues, we expect to see greater quality and efficiency in their spending in these areas as well. The VAT Act already exempts pharmaceuticals, educational items, and basic commodities, which exemptions we are expanding under the Finance Bill 2019. Specifically, Section 46 of the Finance Bill 2019 expands the exempt items to include the following: 1, brown and white bread; B, cereals including maize, rice, wheat, millet, barley, and sorghum; C, fish of all kinds; D, flour and starch meals; E, fruits, nuts, pulses, and vegetables of various kinds; F, roots such as yam, cocoa yam, sweet, and Irish potatoes; G, meat and poultry products, including eggs; H, milk; I, salt and herbs of various kinds; and J, natural water and table water. Additionally, our proposals also raise the threshold for VAT registration to 25 million naira in turnover per annum, such that the revenue authorities can focus their compliance efforts on larger businesses, thereby bringing relief for our micro, small, and medium businesses. It is absolutely essential to intensify our revenue generation efforts. That said, this administration remains committed to ensuring that the inconvenience associated with any fiscal policy adjustments is moderated, such that the poor and the vulnerable, who are most at risk, do not bear the brunt of these reforms. The sum of 8.155 trillion naira is estimated as the total government revenue in 2020 and comprises oil revenue 2.64 trillion naira, non-oil tax revenues of 1.81 trillion naira, and other revenues of 3.7 trillion naira. This is 7% higher than the 2019 comparative estimate of 7.594 trillion naira, inclusive of the government-owned enterprises. The increasing share of non-oil revenues underscores our confidence in our revenue diversification strategies going forward. Furthermore, in our efforts to enhance transparency and accountability, we shall continue our strict implementation of Treasury Single Account, TSA, to capture the domiciliary accounts in our foreign missions and those linked to government-owned enterprises. An aggregate expenditure of 10.33 trillion naira is proposed for the federal government in 2020, The expenditure estimates include statutory transfers of 556.7 billion naira, non-debt recurrent expenditure of 4.8 trillion naira, and 2.14 trillion naira of capital expenditure, excluding the capital components of statutory transfers. Debt service is estimated at 2.45 trillion naira, and provision for sinking fund to retire maturing bonds issued to local contractors is 296 billion naira. The sum of 556.7 billion naira is provided for statutory transfers in the 2020 budget and includes A, 125 billion naira for the National Assembly, B, 110 billion naira for the judiciary, C, 37.83 billion naira for the Northeast Development Commission, D, 44.5 billion naira for the Basic Health Care Provision Fund, E, 111.79 billion naira for the Universal Basic Education Commission, F, 80.8 billion naira for the Niger Delta Development Commission, NDDC, which is now supervised by the Ministry of Niger Delta Affairs. We have increased the budgetary allocation to the National Human Rights Commission from 1.5 billion naira to 2.5 billion naira. This 67% increase in funding is done to enable the Commission to perform its functions more effectively. The non-debt recurrent expenditure includes of 3.6 trillion naira for the personal and pension costs, an increase of 620.28 billion naira over 2019. This increase reflects the new minimum wage, as well as our proposals to improve remuneration and welfare of our police and armed forces. You will all agree that good governance, inclusive growth, and collective prosperity can only be sustained in an environment of peace and security. Our fiscal reforms shall introduce new performance management frameworks to regulate the cost-to-revenue ratios for government-owned enterprises, which shall come under significant scrutiny. We will road exceptional revenue and cost management performance, while severe consequences will attend failures to achieve agreed revenue targets. We will also sustain our efforts in managing personnel costs. Accordingly, I have directed the stoppage of the salary of any federal government staff that is not captured on the integrated payroll and personnel information system platform by the end of October 2019. All agencies must obtain the necessary approvals before embarking on any fresh recruitment, and any contraventions of these directives shall attract severe sanctions. Overhead costs are projected at 426.6 billion naira in 2020. Additional provisions were made only for the newly created ministries. I am confident that the benefits of these new ministries, as it relates to efficient and effective service delivery, to our citizens significantly outweighs their budgeted costs. That said, the respective heads of MDAs must ensure strict adherence to government regulations regarding expenditure control measures. The proliferation of zonal, state, and liaison offices by federal ministries, departments, and agencies with attendant avoidable increase in public expenditure will no longer be tolerated. As I mentioned earlier, investing in critical infrastructure is a key component of our fiscal strategy under the 2020 budget proposals. Accordingly, an aggregate sum of 2.46 trillion naira, inclusive of 318.06 billion in statutory transfers, is proposed for capital projects in 2020. Although the 2020 capital budget is 721.33 billion naira, or 23% lower than the 2019 budget provision of 3.18 trillion naira, it is still higher than the actual and projected capital expenditure outturns for both 2018 and 2019 fiscal years, respectively. However, at 24% of aggregate projected expenditure, the 2020 provision falls significantly short of the 30% target in the Economic Recovery and Growth Plan 2017 to 2020. The main emphasis will be completion of as many ongoing projects as possible, rather than commencing new ones. MDAs have not been allowed to admit new projects into their capital project for 2020, unless adequate provision has been made for the completion of all ongoing projects. Accordingly, we have rolled over capital projects that are not likely to be fully funded by the end of 2019 into 2020 budget. We are aware that the National Assembly shares our view that these projects should be prioritized and given adequate funding in the 2020 Appropriation Act. Therefore, I will once again commend the Ninth National Assembly's firm commitment to stop the unnecessary cycle of delayed annual budget. I am confident that with our renewed partnership, the deliberations of the 2020 budget shall be completed before the end of 2019, so that the Appropriation Act will come into effect by 1st January. Some of the key capital spending allocations in the 2020 budget includes A, works and housing, 262 billion naira. B, power, 127 billion naira. C, transportation, 123 billion naira. D, universal basic education commission, 112 billion naira. E, defense, 100 billion naira. F, zonal intervention projects, 100 billion naira. G, agriculture and rural development, 83 billion naira. H, water resources, 82 billion naira. I, Niger Delta Development Commission, 81 billion naira. J, education, 48 billion naira. K, health, 46 billion naira. I, industry, trade, and investment, 40 billion naira. M, Northeast Development Commission, 38 billion naira. N, interior, 35 billion naira. O, social investment programs, 30 billion naira. P, Federal Capital Territory, 28 billion naira. Q, Niger Delta Affairs Ministry, 24 billion naira. Although government's actual spending has reduced, our plans to leverage private sector funding through our tax credit schemes will ensure our capital programs are sustained. For example, we launched the Road Infrastructure Tax Credit Scheme, pursuant to which I have approved the construction or rehabilitation of 19 Nigerian roads and bridges of 794.4 kilometers across 11 states. Indeed, the scheme has attracted private investment of over 205 billion naira. And the first set of tax credits are being processed by the Federal Ministry of Finance and Budget Planning. As I mentioned during my Independence Day speech, under the Presidential Power Initiative, we will modernize the national grid in 3 phases, starting from 5 gigawatts to 7 gigawatts, then to 11 gigawatts by 2023, and finally 25 gigawatts afterwards in collaboration with the German government and Siemens. Budget deficit is projected to be 2.8 trillion naira in 2020. This includes drawdowns on project-tied loans and the related capital expenditure. This represents 1.52% of estimated GDP, well below the 3% threshold set by the Fiscal Responsibility Act of 2007 and in line with the ERGP target of 1.96%. The deficit will be financed by new foreign and domestic borrowings, privatization proceeds, signature bonuses, and drawdowns on the loans secured for specific development projects. Nigeria remains committed to meeting its debt service obligations. Accordingly, we provided the sum of 2.45 trillion naira for debt service. Of this amount, 71% is to service domestic debt, which accounts for about 68% of the total debt. The sum of 296 billion naira is provided for the sinking fund to retire maturing bonds issued to local contractors. I am confident that our aggressive and re-energized revenue drive will maintain debt revenue ratio at acceptable and manageable levels. We will also continue to be innovative in our borrowings by using instruments such as Sukuk, green bonds, and diaspora bonds. Our government remains committed to ensuring the equitable sharing of economic prosperity. Our focus on inclusive growth and shared prosperity underscores our keen interest in catering for the poor and most vulnerable. Accordingly, we are revamping and improving the implementation of the National Social Investment Program through the newly created Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs, Disaster Management, and Social Development. The National Social Investment Program is already creating jobs and economic opportunity for local farmers and cooks, providing funding to artisans, traders, youth, and supporting small businesses with business education and mentoring. The provision of 65 billion naira for the Presidential Amnesty Program has been retained in the 2020 budget. Furthermore, to fast-track the rebuilding efforts in the Northeast region, a provision of 37.83 billion naira has been made for the Northeast Development Commission. The 2020 budget is expected to accelerate the pace of our economic recovery, promote economic diversification, enhance competitiveness, and ensure social inclusion. We are optimistic of attaining higher and more inclusive GDP growth in order to achieve our objective of massive job creation and lift many of our citizens out of poverty. The efficiency of port operations will also be enhanced by implementing a single customs window, speeding up vessels and cargo handling, and issuing more licenses to build modern terminals in existing ports, especially outside Lagos. Furthermore, completing the reforms to the governance and fiscal terms of the petroleum industry will provide certainty and attract further investment into the sector. A consequence of this will be increase in jobs and in government stake. I therefore seek your support in passing into law 2 petroleum industry executive bills I will be forwarding to you shortly. In addition, we need to quickly review the fiscal terms for deep offshore oil fields to reflect the current realities and for more revenue to accrue to the government. The deep offshore and inland basin production sharing contract amendment bill 2018 was submitted to the 8th National Assembly in June 2018, but was unfortunately not passed into law. I will be re-forwarding the bill to this Assembly very shortly and therefore urge you to pass it. We estimate that this effort can generate at least $500 million United States dollars additional revenue for the federal government in 2020 and over $1 billion from 2021. While the budget is our principal fiscal tool to achieve these socio-economic development targets, we remain committed to prudently planning for our future economic prosperity. In this regard, I have directed the reconstituted Ministry of Finance, Budget and National Planning to commence preparations towards the development of successor medium and long-term economic development plans, particularly as the Nigerian Vision 2020 and the ERGP expire next year. Mr. Senate President, Mr. Speaker, distinguished and honorable members of the National Assembly, this speech would be incomplete without once again commending the patriotic resolve of the 9th Assembly to collaborate with the executive in the short and long term. I assure you of the strong commitment of the executive to deepen the relationship with the National Assembly. As you review the 2020 and 2022 medium-term expenditure framework and fiscal strategy paper, FSP, as well as the 2020 budget estimate. We believe that the legislative process will be quick so as to restore the country to the January-December financial year. It is with great pleasure, therefore, that I lay before this distinguished joint session of the National Assembly the 2020 budget proposals of the government of Nigeria. I thank you most sincerely for your attention. May God bless the Federal Republic of Nigeria.
Omo Agege. Your Excellency and my partner, the Deputy Speaker, House of Representatives, Honorable Ahmed Idris Wase, Principal Officers of the National Assembly, distinguished